Hello, scientists. This is Mr. Miller again. Today, we want to talk about one of one of the things that leaves do that we could probably classify as being the most important job of a leaf, and that is to do a chemical process which is called photosynthesis. Now, if we look at the word photosynthesis, it's made up of two words, photo and synthesis. Photo means light, synthesis means to make or create. So the rough or loose definition of photosynthesis is using light to create something. So what the leaf actually creates during photosynthesis is something called glucose, and glucose is a sugar. Now, sugar is a form of energy. It's a chemical that all living things need, and they break down sugar to release the energy that's stored in that glucose molecule, and they use that energy to do everything. So every cell in every living thing, and we said all living things are made of cells, we're humans, and we're made of trillions of cells. Each one of those cells needs energy to grow, to carry out its function in our body, and to repair itself when it's damaged. All of that takes energy. And that energy all comes from a sugar called glucose. Now, I don't want to overcomplicate this, but photosynthesis is really called the most important chemical reaction on Earth, and it's extremely important to all life. And photosynthesis is a process whereby the leaf uses the sunlight, the energy in the sunlight. And we said that plants harvest this sunlight, and in the leaf, in a specific part of the cell called the chloroplast, and inside this part of the plant cell that is called the chloroplast is a greenish pigment, and that's why most plants are green or shades of green, is called chlorophyll. Now, I don't care if you remember chloroplasts or chlorophyll because you're going to spend a lot of time in seventh grade going over photosynthesis and maybe even in sixth grade too, because it's that important. But the sunlight that we have from the sun provides all the energy we have on our planet. We said that old plants that have stored all these sugars can get buried and turned into coal. They can also be compressed and changed with heat and pressure and become oil or natural gas. And those are all called fossil fuels because they were made millions of years ago. And we use those to power our car, our airplanes, our industry. And we also know that we can use something called a solar panel and harvest the sunlight to create electricity. And now we can use that solar energy to run a calculator, to power our phones, to power our cars. So the energy from the sun is all the energy we're ever going to have. Now, in the leaf, in the chloroplast, because I have glucose, that is a pigment, it absorbs sunlight, and the plant uses that energy from the sunlight to combine two different chemicals. The first one is called carbon dioxide, and you've probably heard that before because all living things expel or breathe out or release into the environment carbon dioxide. The other part is water, and water is coming up through the roots from the soil, and it's carried up the shoot to the leaf, and now the water is available. The carbon dioxide is in the air or in the atmosphere, and it enters the plant through the stomata underneath the leaf. And we'll talk more about that. And In the presence of sunlight, those two compounds, carbon dioxide and water, um, become a product called glucose. And so, besides glucose, I also release oxygen. Now, why is this important? Well, if you think about it, carbon dioxide is poisonous. Okay? The carbon dioxide, or CO2, carbon, C is carbon, O is oxygen. So di means two oxygen, one carbon, comes from the air. The water comes from the soil, and water we say is H2O. And these numbers out front just tell me how many molecules of carbon dioxide, how many molecules of water combine to make one molecule of glucose and six oxygen atoms. So the beauty is we're taking carbon dioxide, which all living things expel, and we turn it into two things that every living thing needs. Every living thing needs oxygen, and every living thing needs sugars in the form of energy. Now, you as a human being, we eat a lot of different things, and the three sources of energy from our diet, and we eat because we can't photosynthesize, we can't produce our own energy like plants can. So we either have to eat the plants or we have to eat the animals that eat the plants. But we take out the sugars, the proteins, the fats, and all the building blocks of everything we eat. And even there's three things we can burn in our body: sugars, fats, and proteins. Fats are the hardest thing to burn. So that's why our body uses it for storage. So we have fat to store energy for leaner times. We have carbohydrates or sugars, and all the sugars have to be broken down into glucose because glucose is the form of sugar that our body burns. And then we have proteins, and our body can convert by breaking down proteins and create energy to make glucose. And then the glucose is broken down to make all the energy that the cell needs. So that's on a cellular level. So we take something that's very harmful, CO2, and is actually poisonous to humans or living things. The plant takes in the CO2 and turns it back into oxygen. So if you note, this is a cycle. This allows us to clean the air. And carbon dioxide, you probably heard, is a greenhouse gas. And they're afraid of CO2 increasing in the environment. Well, if we increase the number of plants and stop destroying the rainforest and all of our natural areas across the country and across the world, and of course, this happens more around the world than in the United States. But as we lose the plants, we lose the ability to turn some of this CO2 into oxygen. And now humans and animals and plants and every living thing take in oxygen, and we will talk about why oxygen is important to take into cells in our next segment. So, photosynthesis is connected with the life. Without photosynthesis, all living things on this planet would have no energy to do the processes that every cell needs to do to either support an organism in its life or support a single celled organism during its life.